It is the morning after week 16 in the NFL. Another wild Sunday of football. I appreciate you guys tuning in here wherever you're listening to the morning after. I'm your host, Jared Smith. A lot to get to on the podcast today. We are just wrapping up Sunday Night Football, where the Baltimore Ravens with Tyler Huntley almost knocked off the New England Patriots, but you credit Drake May. A furious comeback again against one of the softest quarterback schedules in the history of the NFL. But New England wins another game, and they are one step closer to the playoffs. The AFC is just so top-heavy, and we'll get to all of the recaps from all of the games we've seen so far. We still have one more game pending on Monday night. The Phillip Rivers experience continues. We'll get to all of that. We'll do some upgrades and downgrades. We'll go through the futures market and update you on what I'm seeing and if there's any value still left with just a couple of weeks left in the regular season. NFL Week 17 early lines. Already some stuff out there that I'm curious about, especially with a lot of just a ton of quarterback injuries on Sunday as well, which are going to have an impact going forward. And then we'll get to the college football playoff, what we saw from the first round. We have our quarterfinal lines. We've got a solid amount of time, about 10 days to sit on these numbers. And then, of course, a couple more bowl games. One bowl game in particular that will take place on Monday that I'll get to. And then I'll also finish the show with, as we always do, with a little rise and wine. And also a morning glory, an actionable element for you on Monday Night Football in the prop market. But before we get started, please, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are growing. I am getting close, ever so slowly, inching towards the 1,000 subscriber mark. Once we get past 1K, that's another unlock for me to be able to monetize the channel and to continue to put content out there. Again, I film studies and all kinds of good stuff, podcasts, interviews. I'm working on some interviews with some really cool guests. Really busy right now, obviously, with the end of football season. But once we get over the hump into 2026, things start to slow down. I'll be able to get my bearings. I've got some fun partnership things in the works, and we'll do some fun content for you. But for now, obviously, the footy beckons. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to all the newsletters, the social channels. I appreciate your support. I'm doing this for free. I don't get paid for this. I'm doing this because I love to do it. I'm doing it because it helps me get my mind right for the week. And let's be honest, I like to yap. So here we are, yapping on a Sunday night after what was just a wild, absolutely wild weekend in the NFL. All right, we start out like we always do, upgrades and downgrades. First, some big picture stuff. Like the NFL is wide open this year, guys. It's absolutely wide open. The AFC in particular, I think there's probably 4 or 5, maybe even all 7 teams, frankly, that get in the playoffs have a chance to win. I like one in particular. We talked about him last week, the Buffalo Bills. I haven't wavered off of that based on what I saw this week. In fact, after watching the Patriots nearly lose to Tyler Huntley, watching the Broncos get whipped around by Trevor Lawrence, I only feel stronger about the Bills. The NFC, and that's where we start from our Thursday night game, the game that likely will decide the number 1 seed in the NFC, although don't count out the Niners just yet. Seattle, furious comeback to beat the Rams. Box score was pretty even, but the Rams lost the game despite +3 turnover margin. Like, that just can't happen. I am going to downgrade the Rams a little bit, and I am going to upgrade Seattle. And it's not because I think Seattle outplayed the Rams. They didn't. Sam Darnold continued to make bad decisions. And the Rams offense, Puka Nacua, was unstoppable. But when you lose a game like that, it can be an eye opener. It can be a shockwave kind of game. So I think I'll push the Rams because I was pretty high on the Rams rating. I had them as the number 1 team in the league by 3 full points. Maybe I was a little too heavy on the Rams. So we'll pump the brakes a little bit on the Rams. We'll get Seattle and the Rams basically even in the ratings. I think right now, based off of what I had, right, I had the Rams 3 points in front of Seattle. So now if I upgrade Seattle 1 and downgrade the Rams 1, then we're 1 point away. And I think that probably makes sense, right? Like, I think if you watch those two teams play last Thursday night, they're pretty evenly matched. You trust Stafford more than you trust Darnold, but that Seattle defense ain't no joke. And the Rams are going through an injury issue on the outside with Adams. Obviously, Puka Nacua didn't matter, but I'd still rather have Adams than not. So I will, for the time being, we'll soften our position on the Rams a little bit, but I still think they're the best team in the NFC, and I think Seattle's right there, a point behind. The Saturday games, let's start with the one that wasn't very exciting, or I guess the one that was a little bit more ho-hum. Eagles over the Commanders. They covered as a road favorite. They won the box score. I think we upgrade Philly. I think we feel, even though the Commanders were dealing with a quarterback injury, Josh Johnson played, I think that's a rivalry game. Like, you could tell. Now, to be fair, Philly was basically a home game for Philly on the road in Washington. But those teams do not like each other, right? They played in the NFC Championship game last year. The Commanders beat the Eagles in an upset last year with Jaden Daniels. And the Eagles definitely poured it on a little bit with that 2-point conversion. And especially considering Philly is going to clinch the division. They have clinched the division. And the next two games don't really mean much for them. I could see Washington winning the return game the last week of the year. And that would keep the Eagles under their win total of 11.5, which would be great for me because I bet them under 11.5. But that game has some juice to it. Like, these NFC East games have some juice to it. So I think you upgrade Philly for their win, and obviously you downgrade the Commanders. And if it is Josh Johnson next week, we downgrade him even more because the drop-off from Mariota, who's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL, to Josh Johnson, I think is at least a point, probably more. The craziest game perhaps of the year. I know that sounds wild because we've had so many crazy games. In fact, you could argue the Thursday night game, Rams-Seahawks, was the craziest game of the year. But this Packers-Bears game is a big turning point in the NFC. The Packers win that game. They probably now, because of the Ravens' injuries and their season, they probably win next week, and then they probably beat the Vikings the week after. They probably win the NFC North, and they're probably the 2 or the 3 seed. But now this loss drops them down to a scenario where they've got to win at least one of these games in order to get into the playoffs. Now, the Lions did them some help a little bit later in the day, losing, so I guess Green Bay's noose isn't quite as tight around their neck, but they had this game won. Up 2 scores late, Chicago recovers the onside kick, the crazy 4th down conversion for the touchdown to basically a rookie nobody, and then the insane throw in overtime to DJ Moore. I mean, Caleb Williams, that's one of the throws of the year. Listen, this Chicago team, they did mix the box score. Like, it wasn't a clean box score. They won the yards per play. They lost success rate. They won the turnover margin. They committed 10 penalties. But Caleb Williams didn't take a sack. The problem was they didn't really do a good job getting into the red zone, and they went 2 for 11 on 3rd down. Green Bay, though, went 0 for 5 in the red zone. And I know the Jordan Love injury probably had something to do with that, but this game, star this game, because if Green Bay ends up going on the road, and I don't know who they would face, whatever the standing shakeout, maybe it'll be Philly, right? Maybe it'll be Chicago again. Instead of getting a home game in the playoff for the division, for winning the division, Lambeau Field is such a weapon at home in January. I really think I was already kind of out on Green Bay after the Parsons injury. It's just really tough to see them going the distance. But now that they're going to have to win 3 games on the road to get to the Super Bowl, I mean, I just don't see a scenario where they make it to the Super Bowl. So, unfortunately, the NFC is wide open, but I think Chicago might have their number. Like, the one thing I think the one thing I've struggled with these rankings and these assessments and these adjustments this year is these games are plinko, man. Like, you just never know who's going to win. And I've fallen into this trap so many times where the game looked dead and buried. I thought this Patriots-Ravens game tonight was over with down 2 scores with Vrabel running a stupid fake punt. But these teams just come back from the dead. And then it's just a random play, coin flip play late in the game that decides it. And when the margins are that thin, you have to be very mentally tough to overcome those swings. And I think this Bears team is a pretty mentally tough team. Why? Because I really like their head coach. I don't think it's a surprise that teams like the Bears and teams like the Patriots are winning ugly games, because that kind of embodies the personality of their head coach. Like, I remember when Ben Johnson turned down the job 2 years ago with the Commanders. And I remember going on VSiN that night and doing a show and saying, whenever this guy gets a head coaching job, I am going to buy in, because he wouldn't have turned down a head coaching job unless he didn't think he was ready or it was the right fit, which means I trust him that when he does accept a head coaching job, it is going to be the right fit. And it's clearly the right fit. I think the Chicago team, listen, I don't love the polish of the quarterback. I think their defense can improve, but it's been better this year. But they're a really well-coached team. They might be one of the most well-coached teams in the league. And I'll throw Liam Cohen and the Jaguars into that mix too. We'll get to them in a little bit after their big win. But it's not a coincidence that the teams that are winning in gritty ways, right? This is a greasy season in the NFL. The best teams don't have the best records. Chiefs out of the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Ravens out of the playoffs for the first time in several years. Changing of the guard in the AFC. The NFC has these two elite teams in one division. Actually, I'll say three elite teams in one division. And the defending champs. So it's a very unbalanced, bizarre season in the NFL. And I don't know who's going to come out on top. But I know if you're well coached and you win the margins, which the Bears do, the Patriots do, the Broncos were until today. The Jaguars are winning in the margins. They're winning those little plays, those greasy plays that decide games. And they're really well coached. They're making good decisions in game management. They're not beating themselves. And that's, to me, that's the name of the game when you have to win in the NFL. Speaking of winning in the margins, Buffalo just got by the skin of their teeth. Although, to be fair, I watched that whole game because I did lay 10 with the Bills. Dawson Knox dropped the touchdown on fourth down that would have put him up 10. And we probably should have pushed that number. But Buffalo does escape Cleveland with a win. They slight win in the box score. I'm just going to leave that one be. Honestly, I'm not going to upgrade Buffalo because I've already got him as my highest rated team in the AFC. I'm not going to downgrade Cleveland. Although if it does go from Shador to Dylan Gabriel, I might downgrade him a little bit for that because Shador's played okay in his short stint as the starter. He did leave with injury. He came back. I don't know what the status is. We'll get more information next week. But if it is Cleveland going to Dylan Gabriel, I'll probably downgrade the Browns a little bit. But if it's Shador again next week, I'm going to leave him be. I thought they battled in this game, and the line game probably should have landed right on the number. So I'm not going to upgrade Buffalo. I'm not going to downgrade Cleveland. We are going to upgrade the Chargers. They went on the road as a slight dog, and they really put it to Dallas. I didn't understand the number in this one. The Chargers were one of my sides that I bet this week, one of my really strong sides of the week. I did not understand why they were underdogs. I had them in my ratings as a slight favorite, and they won by 17. Justin Herbert's a machine. Honestly, I know the Chargers are the Chargers, and it's tough for us to get over that mental block. Trust me, I get it. But I think the Harbaugh culture is a little different. And this Herbert kid, man, he is tough as nails. And their offensive line's a mess. They've got some weapons. I like their tight end, Gadsden, when he's healthy. I like their receivers. Johnston and Harris were really good today. And we like the running game, too, Hampton and Vidal. Like, if they just had any semblance of an offensive line to hold up, this is a Super Bowl contending team. It really is. The defense is a tricky zone to decipher, right? Dak really struggled with it, especially in the second half. So I think the Chargers are a sneaky team, especially if Herbert can get a little healthy over the next 2 weeks. I don't know what their standing is, but if they can lock up that 5 seed and not have to play Week 18 and give Herbert a week off, man, like, that dude is like a walking wounded. He was bleeding from his elbow today. He's got the broken hand. I mean, he is battling it out. If you don't think these guys are tough, man, I'd be out for 2 months if I had his injuries. And he continues to play, stare down the barrel of the gun, take hits, and deliver footballs into tight windows. Just an incredible season for Justin Herbert and the Chargers as they go way over their win total, and they are securely in the AFC postseason. And they've got a chance now after the Broncos lost today to win that division. Titans beat the Chiefs. They dominated the game, especially the box score, plus 2.3 net yards per play. Disaster situation for the Chiefs. I thought there was some value there, and once Minshew got hurt, I think he tore his ACL. Obviously, that was done. Chris Oladokun, the backup for Kansas City, is going to start the last 2 weeks. I probably would fade the Chiefs the last 2 weeks. I think that might be one of those situations where the market just can't fully account for how much they've just laid down. They laid down in the second half of that game against the Titans. Again, I was on Kansas City, so I was watching it pretty closely. And once Oladipo came in, and it was obvious that Tennessee was going to win the game, right? They had like a 2-score lead in the second half. The Chiefs just, I just think they're gassed. They played a lot of football over the last decade, and it'll be an interesting offseason. Obviously, the Mahomes rehab is going to be a big story, but is Andy Reid the coach next year? Do they make any changes on the staff? Travis Kelce's retiring. It is going to be a very interesting news-making offseason for the Kansas City Chiefs. Saints belt to ass against the Jets. Not really much to get to there. We hit our Tyler Shuck under. We barely hit the under in the game. It got tight late. The Saints just kept piling it on. I have the Jets rated as the worst team in the NFL right now with Brady Cook. I mean, they're just 3.1 yards per play. They're a disaster. Speaking of a disaster, the other team in New York also gained about 3 yards per play, losing at home to the Vikings. It was Max Brosmer for a decent chunk of the game. J.J. McCarthy got hurt. He just continues to be another walking wounded. I would imagine it'll be Brosmer next week. I think they play on Christmas, if I recall. So that'll be fun. Lions, Vikings on Christmas Day. Jared Goff against Max Brosmer. We'll have fun with that one. Carolina, one of the bigger upsets of the day in terms of how it flips the playoff picture. Tampa Bay came in as the favorite to win the NFC South. They were going to be favored in this game on the road. They were going to be favored against the Dolphins next week, and then obviously favored in Week 18 at home against Carolina. But Carolina said, "Not so fast, my friend." The box score was relatively even. The difference in the game was just the Baker pick in overtime. I thought that was really it. I thought the Bucs played well enough to win. I thought the Panthers made a few plays and played well enough to win. But you credit Bryce Young for making a couple more plays than Baker Mayfield did. The Bucs really have fallen off a cliff. I don't really think it's Baker's injury that's the issue. I just think they're a team that got hot early, and they're not as good as, maybe some of the early numbers indicated. Sorry, I'm adjusting my chair here. It's going to be a long podcast. I want to make sure I have good posture, right, so my back doesn't hurt tomorrow. All right, Jacksonville over Denver. The Broncos, see, this is like the flip of what the Broncos have been doing all year. All year, the Broncos have been losing the box score and winning the game. Today, they won the box score pretty decisively and lost the game. The problem was 2 turnovers, and they just could not finish drives. They only got into the red zone twice, and they failed on one of the spots, and they had some late turnovers, and we kind of saw the bad Bo Nix. He missed some reads on the last drive of the game. I think when I watch Bo Nix, I feel like he's one bagel short of a dozen. Like I'm not there. I'm not there on him. I prefer Drake May to Nix for sure. Like if I'm grading the young quarterbacks that are going to make their playoff debuts this year or make their first real splash. I know Nix was in the playoffs last year, but he was not really established like he was now. This is his team now. I think I'd prefer May over Nix. If I had to pick one of those two guys, right, that are going to be kind of on those upstart AFC teams, I think I'd lean Patriots over Broncos. I do not trust Denver. I really don't. They're going to be a fade in the playoffs, and now they might not even get the number 1 seed. If they have to go on the road in the playoffs, they are going to be one of my favorite fades of Wild Card Weekend. But we'll see how it shakes out with them and the Chargers over the last couple weeks. I don't think they play each other, if I recall. Who does Denver play? If Denver plays the Chargers last week of the year, oh wow, they do. That Broncos Chargers game week 18. I'm calling it right now on December 21st. That's going to be the game that's going to be flexed to the last game of the year. That game might decide the division and the number 1 seed in the AFC. It really might. Man, that would be wild. That would be an awesome finish to the year because the Chargers won the first game, right? Yep. Yes, they did. So that's the rub right there. Man, I really thought the Patriots were going to lose tonight. Patriots could still get the number 1 seed in the AFC. They play the Jets and the Dolphins. That Broncos-Chargers game the last week of the year is going to decide the division. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an awesome game. I can't wait. All right, let's get back to it. Atlanta beats Arizona. Box score was kind of mixed. I didn't read this game very well. I thought Brissett would have another high attempts game. That didn't happen. I thought Cousins would do a good job tearing up this Cardinal secondary. It was more of a running game. It was Bijan Robinson left, right, and center. But you got to upgrade Atlanta. You got to downgrade Arizona, obviously. A lot of upgrades and downgrades this week. The only games where I didn't upgrade or downgrade the winner or loser was Buffalo, Cleveland, and then Vegas, Houston coming up a little later. Pittsburgh goes on the road. They upset Detroit. Pretty much put a dagger in Detroit's playoff hopes at 7 losses now. Tough year for the Lions. Really banged up. Another defensive year where they just can't keep anyone healthy. They've lost 4 of their last 6. And they're giving up a lot of points in that span. Like, really, their only nice win in that stretch is, to Dallas, and they still gave up 30 points. The win over the Giants, they needed to come back and claw back from Jameis Winston's surge. And then they beat the Commanders a few weeks prior. And I think that was without Jaden Daniels. So, they haven't beaten a team with a winning record. Now that the Bucs are under 500, how about this? The Lions haven't beaten a team with a winning record since week 2. The Chicago Bears, when they blew them up, 52-21. Both teams have taken very different paths since then. So the Lions have 8 wins this year. Their last 7 wins have come against the Cowboys, under 500. Giants, under 500. Commanders, one of the worst teams in the league. Bucks, now under 500 after today. Bengals, one of the worst teams in the league. Browns, one of the worst teams in the league. Ravens, under 500 after today. And then the Bears. I mean, that is... tough year for the Lions. Tough year for Detroit. Tough year for Dan Campbell. Tough year for their offensive line. They seem to be not as physical of a team as they've been in prior years. They allowed the Steelers to gain 7 yards per play, and their run game just didn't look great. I think Detroit's got some soul-searching to do in the offseason. They're going to be trying to reinvigorate what was a nice little run for them over the last few years, but now that's kind of fallen back to earth a little bit. Texans hang on to beat the Raiders. This game pissed me off. The Raiders actually won the box score. And frankly, a couple of plays from winning that game. The Texans defense did not play well. I guess it was kind of a letdown spot for them. They were a 2-touchdown favorite in the game. If anything, we should downgrade them, but I'll just leave them be because I do think it was kind of a natural letdown spot. Houston's been playing some really good ball over the last few weeks. I think they're a very dangerous team. They've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row, and they play the Chargers next week in what's going to be one of the biggest games of the year. This is a potential playoff preview. It's a potential AFC championship preview. I think these are 2 of the 6 best teams in the AFC that'll be playing next week at SoFi Stadium. Really excited to watch that game. It's a rematch of the playoffs last year, too. Houston bounced the Chargers out of the playoffs last year. Remember that game? Houston's been, the thing about Houston, since they've made that GM coaching switch, they went to Caserio and Ryans, and they drafted Stroud and Will Anderson. They've won a playoff game both years. They've won the wild card round both years, and then they've lost in the divisional round both years. So I kind of think that's the floor for Houston. I think winning a wild card game is kind of the floor. And the ceiling is probably reaching an AFC championship or maybe reaching a Super Bowl. I don't know if they're good enough to win a Super Bowl. I think the NFC's better this year. I do. But a Texans-Bills AFC championship game would be really fun. Remember, we saw that game a few Thursdays ago. Houston won a really tight one. So Buffalo's going to have revenge on their mind. That'd be a really fun AFC championship game. I love when teams play in the playoffs in a rematch of the regular season. A, it gives us some film to watch that we can digest and break down. And B, I just think the storylines are just better. I think it's more entertaining when they have a rematch of a regular season game. And it usually happens because it's usually divisional teams at one point, or, in the case of the game last year, the Chiefs had a couple of those. So I think it's always fun when they do rematches. Cincinnati belt to ass over Miami. Actually, the yards per play was even. It was the success rate that was different. Plus 22% net success rate. Joe Burrow looked pretty good. They were plus 3 on the turnover margin. Quinn Ewers, predictably, did not show much. So we're going to downgrade Miami pretty significantly if they go with Ewers again next week. And I guess you give Cincinnati a slight boost, but you can only bump them up so much with that defense, giving up almost, again, They won the success rate pretty handily, but they still gave up 6.7 yards per play to Quinn Ewers. So still some questions there with that Bengals defense. Domination had a good day, so not fully sold on a return to form for Cincinnati. Patriots over the Ravens. That was the Sunday night game. The Pats did win the box score. They were down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. You credit them for coming back, but you're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter to Tyler Huntley. You make a boneheaded fake punt call that you didn't need because you're facing Tyler Huntley. And I don't trust this Patriots team in the playoffs. I really don't. We'll see what the matchups are. We'll see if they end up getting home field. The Bills must be really upset because if New England would have lost that game tonight, then Buffalo's got that AFC East title squarely in their sights. But now it looks like if New England can win their last 2 games, they're going to win the division, which is huge. Again, it keeps Buffalo out of the home saddle. Getting a home game in the playoffs at that stadium, the last year of the Bills stadium, it's like a cheat code. So I really think that was a massive win for the Patriots tonight to be able to exercise some demons in Baltimore and erase a 2-score deficit in the fourth quarter in what was a pretty exciting game. All right, so that's upgrades and downgrades for the week. Let's look at the ratings. I'll give you Super Bowl Island as we move into Week 17 in the NFL. I will draw the line. I'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams. I'll give you 8 teams. My Super Bowl Island is 8 deep. Rams, Seahawks, Bills, Texans, Eagles, Bears, Chargers, Patriots. I also think San Francisco is right there. In fact, you know what? 9 teams. Add the Niners. 9. Add the Niners into that mix because they control their own destiny and they could beat Seattle that final game and they could win the NFC West and win the 1 seed. So San Francisco deserves to be on the list. They've been playing good ball over the last couple months. So I have 9 teams that are 5 points or better than an average team in the NFL, and those are my top 9 power-rated teams that are on Super Bowl Island. These are really the only teams I believe can win a Super Bowl this year. Rams, Seahawks, Bills, Texans, Eagles, Bears, Chargers, Patriots, Niners. Broncos, Jaguars, Packers, Steelers. Ravens we're going to throw out. Lions we're going to throw out. So I have 3 teams that are lurking. Broncos, Packers, Jaguars, and Steelers. But I'll be honest, I don't trust that Steelers defense. I've got 9. I've got 9 solid teams that can win the Super Bowl this year. And if I'm really getting nitpicky, I don't trust Sam Darnold. So I'm probably going to dismiss Seattle when we get to the big game. I don't think the Chargers' defensive line or offensive line is good enough to hang against a really good pass rush. So I don't think the Chargers are going to end up being there either. I still think the Bears are a year away. I don't think Chicago is legit. But I have to give them credit for winning these games. Regardless of my opinion on the overall vibe, the overall rating, the overall ceiling, I still have to give them credit for winning the games. This is the hardest thing to do in handicapping. You have an opinion about a team. I don't want to say stubborn about that opinion, but you trust your gut. You trust your instinct on a certain team. But that team continues to prove you wrong by winning, even if they're winning ugly, which Denver was, New England is. Like, these teams are not winning pretty, and they're not beating great teams, especially New England. But they're winning. And you've got to give them credit. Like, you've got to put your opinion of the situation aside and still give them credit for winning games in the NFL. Because I think we sit up here in our ivory tower and we judge everything. You should have done this. You needed to do that. But at the end of the day, these players and these coaches only care about one thing, and that's winning. And as long as they're winning, it cleans up and it makes nice of a lot of ugliness. So that's why I'm always fascinated when a team loses. A good team that's playing well drops a game. I love seeing how they respond to it. The Lions were kings of this. They lose a game, they win the next game by 30. It'll be interesting to see how Denver bounces back next week. It'll be, and that they play Kansas City and an easy matchup, but it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. Do they go belt to ass, or do they play with their food and win by a field goal? They're a double-digit favorite in the game over Chris Oladipoon and the Chiefs, who have nothing to play for. Do they win by 15? Do they win by 2 touchdowns plus? Or do they kick a late field goal to win, and all of a sudden you're like, man, Denver. No separation. So I'm always fascinated to see how teams bounce back. Now, the problem is, when you get this late in the proceedings, you usually don't have a chance to bounce back, because if you lose a game this late, you're typically out. So we'll see. Obviously, Denver's in, but in a couple weeks, if they lose a game, they have no chance to bounce back. So it'll be fascinating to see how they do bounce back next week. But I've got 9 teams in my squarely on Super Bowl Island right now. I'll give them to you one more time. Take out your pen. Rams, Seahawks, Bills, Texans, Eagles, Bears, Chargers, Patriots, Niners. If I had to pick the Super Bowl right now, I'll say Bills and Rams. I'll stick with it. I said Bills and Rams last week. Not going to change my mind this week. Nothing that happened in that Rams-Seahawks game leads me to believe that the Rams are not the better team. They were the better team for the majority of that game. And then they just fell apart in the fourth quarter. And I think if they had another opportunity to play that game, I think they'd win it. I hope they're a dog, too, because I'll definitely be betting them if they're a dog. All right, let's look at some look-ahead lines for Week 17 in the NFL. We have 3 games on Christmas Day. We start with the Cowboys and the Commanders. Dallas minus 5.5. I make it 5.5. I want nothing to do with that game. Neither team really has anything to play for. Lions at Vikings. I make it 6. I make it 4.5. The line is 6, so I'm not going to do much with that. Obviously, the Lions are better than the Vikings, especially if Max Brosmer is playing. If Brosmer is playing, my guess is this number continues to push up. Maybe 7 is kind of that stopping point. I don't know how injured J.J. McCarthy is. I think it was a hand. I think it was an injured hand. He went back for an x-ray. It was negative, but Brosmer finished the game. Broncos, Chiefs. I make it 10.5. It's 12.5. Obviously, we don't know how good Chris Oladipoon is. We've never seen him play. He played, I think, a handful of preseason snaps and a little bit today in the game. Didn't look great today, but Denver's coming off that loss. They're on the road. It's Christmas night. I mean, do you really want to lay 13? Probably not, but that's really the only way I can consider playing that game. I mean, you can't play Kansas City. You just can't. I think you just have to believe that the end of that Titans game was kind of the last competitive football they were going to play this year. I don't see them. I don't see them going balls to the wall. And even if they do, they're very banged up. So their talent level. That's the problem that Kansas City's had this year. They just cannot stay healthy, especially up front. Arizona at Cincinnati. I make this game 5.5. It's 6.5. You really want to lay a touchdown with that Bengals defense? I sure as hell don't. Packers, Ravens. So this is a tough one, right? I make the game a half, but that's with Lamar Jackson. And he's definitely not going to be fully healthy, even if he plays. First of all, this is a Saturday night game, so he's got one less day to prepare. Second of all, they're out of the playoffs. So if you're Lamar, are you going to really rush back? I think if Huntley plays, I think I downgrade the Ravens a full touchdown. So we'll go from a 4 to a -3. And that means I would make the Packers a 7.5-point favorite at home. So we'll see what we open at. Again, I'm recording this on a Sunday night. The game just ended between the Ravens and the Patriots. We have no idea what Lamar Jackson's status is. And I'm assuming that number will be very volatile based off of the news we get from him over the next day or so. Raiders at Giants, or actually, excuse me, Giants at Raiders. This one's out here in Vegas. Maybe I should go to this game. This game will likely decide who is the number one pick, who gets the number one pick in the NFL draft. Titans won this week, so these are the two worst teams in the NFL in terms of their record. I make the game Raiders -1.5, and the Giants are a slight favorite, a 1-point favorite. Obviously, not a huge win probability shift from 1 to 1.5 on the other side. But if you can get the Giants, if you can get the Raiders at plus money, and I make them a 1.5-point favorite, I feel like that's a bet maybe you want to make. But then you also have what team is going to actually put forth a full effort. Now, this is a great time to mention tanking in the NFL. Tanking does not exist in the way that you think it exists. I see a lot of this. I consume a lot of gambling content, a lot of sports prediction content, a lot of analysts on TV telling me who to bet on and what to do. When they say the teams aren't playing for anything, it drives me nuts. They're always playing for something, especially in the NFL. Here's what they're playing for: their paycheck, not getting cut, their job next year, and whatever scenario happening on the field that day, which is someone trash talks them, someone does something else, something like these are alpha athletes, the alpha of the alpha. If someone looks at them the wrong way, they're going to get motivated. They're going to be pissed off. You saw what DK Metcalf did to that fan in Detroit today. Don't even get me started on that. These guys are tweaked, and they are in full gear, basically in battle. Once that whistle blows and that game starts, they're not thinking about who the draft pick is next year. It doesn't exist. The way that tanking is done in the NFL is done during the week. Hey, we want to give this backup player some run because we want to see what we have. And he's significantly worse than the starter. That's how tanking's done in the NFL. It's done in very subtle ways. It's not done overtly. It can't be done overtly. It'd be obvious to everyone, and the team would get fined. So neither of those teams, once the game starts, is going to give two flying hoots about who has the number one pick next year. But we'll see who's playing in that game. And that'll be a pretty good indicator of which general manager and which front office would be much more interested in losing this one. It's always fun when these two teams, when the two teams at the bottom of the barrel play late in the year, and the loser is actually the winner in a weird, twisted way. But I make the game 1.5. The Raiders a slight favorite. Again, if you can get the Raiders as a slight underdog, I feel like that's probably a bet that you can make. Houston at the Chargers. Love this game. It's going to be one of the games of the week. Probably will be the game of the week. This is going to be a Saturday game. So both of these teams with one less day to prepare. I make the game Chargers -0.5, and it's Chargers basically a pick 'em. -1, -1.5. The game, I'm right on the number. So probably a good teaser spot for whoever's the underdog, especially if it's Houston +1.5, get them up through both keys. It's probably a decent way to play it. Seattle at Carolina, huge game for both of those teams. Carolina, despite their win today, they haven't clinched anything yet. They've got to win this game, and they got to win next week. They got to win one of those games. You can't go 0-2. So you're an 8.5. I make it 8.5. I make Seattle an 8.5-point road favorite at Carolina next week. The line is 7. So, yeah, maybe you tease down Seattle. I would imagine that doesn't go beneath the key number of 7. I think Carolina's upgrade happened already, and I think if anything, there'll be some money that'll come in on Seattle this week. I don't see that being under a touchdown. I think if it's under a touchdown, I think you'll see some serious money come in on Seattle. I don't trust Carolina. I still don't. I thought the Bucs, they did not really show me much today. Although Bryce Young continues to make some big throws in big spots, but I would lean to Seattle there. Pittsburgh at Cleveland. I make Pittsburgh a 9.5-point favorite, and it's only 4.5. Interesting. Yeah, you got to bet Pittsburgh there. Although they're coming off a big emotional win. But they still need to win. They still need to win. They still need to go 1-1 down the stretch in order to make the playoffs. Because if they go 0-2 and the Ravens go 2-0, then the Ravens will win. The Ravens will win the AFC North. So Pittsburgh still has to be antenna up, even though on paper it's a pretty easy game against Cleveland. I would lean Pittsburgh there. I like Pittsburgh there. I think the Steelers would be a play for me at 4.5. I make the game 8. I make the game 9.5. So I'm really down on Cleveland, guys. I'm really down on Cleveland, especially if it's Dylan Gabriel. New Orleans at Tennessee. I make the game a pick'em, and it looks like New Orleans is a slight favorite. I'm seeing 2.5. I even see a 3 out there. I mean, you really want to lay 3 on the road with New Orleans? I don't. I think New Orleans has been playing really good ball the last few weeks. I think 3, I would take Tennessee. I would probably take the Titans at 3, although I hate betting on Tennessee. Even today. Excuse me. It's been a long week. Even today, they wanted to give that game away. They were committing penalties left and right. I mean, the Chiefs just had absolutely nothing. If they were playing any offense with a pulse, I think that game would have been much closer today. I would probably lean Tennessee. If you get the full 3 there, I'll take 3 at home with the Titans. But I don't want to bet the Titans plus 3. I really don't want to bet that Tennessee team. I make Jacksonville a 6.5-point road favorite at Indy. Obviously, the Colts still have to play on Monday night. Right now, that line's right at 6.5. So I'm right on the number. Obviously, if the Colts win, upset the Niners on Monday night, that number probably comes down. If they lose, unless it's like Rivers disaster, nuclear, maybe it goes to 7, but divisional game on the road, I don't see it going too much higher than that. So if it does flash 7, that might be where some Colts money comes in. New England at the Jets. I make New England a 15.5-point favorite. It's 12.5. I probably would bet New England there. Although the Travion Henderson injury is concerning. They had a lot of injuries in this game against the Ravens. So maybe check the injury report before you make that bet. But under 2 touchdowns, I would think New England would be a decent wager for you there. This is the game of the week. This is really the game of the week. Philly at Buffalo, Super Bowl preview perhaps. I make it 2.5 with Buffalo as a slight favorite at home, and the line is 2.5. I'm right on the number. It's not going to matter much in the playoff picture. I think New England's going to win the East. I think their win tonight kind of sealed it. They play the Dolphins and the Jets the next 2 weeks. You just don't see them losing those games. And if they win their last 2 games, they're the champs in the AFC East. So after Buffalo's win last week, like I might consider Philly if you get a full 3 here. If a 3 flashes in the market at any time this week on Philly, I feel like that would be a bet I might be interested in. But I'll wait. I'm not in a rush. If it keeps moving down, if the dog keeps taking money there and the Eagles then get lower, I'll probably just stay off the game because I think the way I think Buffalo futures, like you can still get 8-1 on Buffalo to win the Super Bowl. I still think they're the team in the AFC. I think they're the best team in the AFC, and they're not being priced that way. So that's the only Buffalo bet I'd be interested in this week. Another really good game, man. We got some really good playoff-type preview games this week. Chicago at San Francisco. I make it San Francisco minus 1.5, and the line's 3. You can get a full 3 with Chicago. Obviously, what the Niners do on Monday night will impact this number. Tough to bet against this Bears team right now. They seem to have the lucky rabbit foot securely lodged up their rectum. I would consider taking 3 with Chicago. But I think the Niners might be the number 1 seed in the NFC. And they need the game like blood, whereas the Bears can probably drop a game and still win the division. So I would probably look to actually bet San Francisco under a field goal if you can find it. Especially if the Niners go belt to ass on the Colts and Phillip Rivers on Monday night. You can't imagine this is going to go south of 3. So 3 might be your best buying spot on San Francisco. I do see some soft threes, some -3, -105s. I see a really juiced -2, -125. So again, shop around, see what your best number is. If you can get a relatively cheap price on a San Francisco -2.5, and you feel like they're going to take care of business against the Colts Monday night, that probably closes 3, maybe even 3.5. So I would lean San Francisco in that game. Finally, the Monday night game, not very enticing. Rams at Falcons. It'll be Kirk Cousins again for the Falcons. Rams will be on long rest for that after their loss, and they'll be pretty pissed off, I would imagine, coming off that tough loss to the Seahawks. I make the game Rams -11.5. It's 8. I'm even seeing some 7.5s out there. I would probably bet the Rams there. That'll probably be my teaser of the week, is Rams to Texans maybe. Rams to Seahawks maybe. I think Rams, yeah, I like the Seahawks because standalone, right? I like these teaser spots because there are a lot of standalone games, right? We like the Rams on Monday night. We like Seattle as a road favorite on Sunday afternoon, and then Houston up as a road dog on Saturday. So that's a good little 3-team, 6-point teaser for you through all key numbers. Denver might be another one too. You get them underneath a touchdown, right? Those are decent teasers too. You go from 13 down to 6. If you want to throw in a Thursday game, right? You want to make it a 4-day. You want to just spam the board for a teaser 4 consecutive days in the NFL. But I think the best bets in the teaser department, Saturday, tease up Houston. Sunday, tease down Seattle. Monday, tease down the Rams. Best bets in the standalone department, I'll probably lay it with Pittsburgh. Did I do Tampa Bay and Miami? I didn't. Tampa Bay at Miami. I make Tampa Bay. Yeah, we didn't get to that game. Sorry. I make Tampa Bay a 1.5-point favorite, and it's 4.5. Ugh, the market hates Quinn Ewers, but I hate Tampa right now. Maybe I'm not down enough on Quinn Ewers. I'll probably lay off that game for now. I'm probably going to bet the Patriots, too, as long as their injury report doesn't look too bad. You know, especially if they get Henderson back, I'm going to be on the Patriots. And I'll probably be on the Raiders, right? If the Raiders are an underdog, I'll probably be on the Raiders because I make them a slight favorite. So that's your look at the Week 17 lines in the NFL. And hopefully you found some early value. All right, let's get to college football playoff recap. Man, what a wild weekend in the college football playoff. Everyone was shitting on Bama down 17-0 and basically saying the game was over. Have we not learned anything that these games are 4 quarters long? If you're calling a game in the first half, you need to reassess your knowledge of ball. Now, the fourth quarter comebacks, those are the ones that trip people up because it's like the game's literally over. But in the first half, like there's so much time left. You just cannot count these teams out. Oklahoma goes up 17-0. They look great in the first half. And then Alabama woke up. It's kind of ironic how the 2 games between Alabama and Oklahoma were like mirror images of each other this year. Alabama at home gave up a pick 6, missed a field goal, lost to the Sooners. Then on the road, they get a pick 6. Oklahoma misses a couple field goals, and they win on the road. So it's like both teams won on the road. Both teams got special teams and defensive plays, huge game-changing splash plays on defense and special teams. And that's how it was decided. I thought John Mateer, frankly, played pretty well. Threw for over 300 yards, ran it well. But the defense for Bama did a really good job in the second half, keeping his legs contained. And the Bama offensive line stepped up and shut down that Oklahoma defense in the second half. So I think Bama's very live against Indiana, guys. That number opens 6.5. It's the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, Alabama and Indiana. I'm seeing some 7s, even some 7.5s out there right now. I am betting Bama in that game. Prove it to me, Indiana. Prove it. And if you're going to win by more than a touchdown. Like, even the game against Ohio State, where I didn't think Ohio State played that well, they still could barely, eke out a field goal win. So I think Alabama comes in with some confidence, right? House money. All bets are off when you erase a deficit like that and everyone counts you out. Everyone was counting them out the week prior. I mean, Ty Simpson gave us the Geno Smith, they wrote us off, we ain't right back line. I mean, you don't think these kids hear what we say in the media. You're crazy. They listen to everything. They consume everything. They're on their phones 24/7. And everybody shat on Bama for the last 2 weeks. It was Bama derangement syndrome. They are the Chiefs of the NFL. People cannot handle when they have any success. Even the people who were saying Bama doesn't deserve to be in the playoff, even after they won the game, they were still like, yeah, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. Like, they get no credit. And they get a lot of hate when they do things poorly. So I don't want to shit on Oklahoma too much. I mean, obviously you blow a 17-point lead. There's some level of culpability on the other side. But I honestly think that was more Bama winning than Oklahoma losing. Those receivers for Bama, that offensive line, that defense in the second half, they made plays. Yeah, Oklahoma made a few mistakes, as teams typically do when they lose games. But Alabama also made a lot of plays in that game. They scored 34 points, and I know maybe you want to say they only scored 27. One of them was a pick six. That's fine. They scored 27 offensive points against the Oklahoma defense that never gives up more than 24. So on the road, down 17-zip, not scoring in the first quarter. In the last three, they scored 27 on offense against them. So I think you really have to give Bama a lot of credit for being very resilient. And in a year in college football where it is wide open, maybe it's the toughest team mentally, not the toughest team physically that ends up winning in the end. That's why I really like Georgia, because I think Georgia's got that mental edge over teams because of just their coach and the way that the style that they play. But enough of the Bama derangement syndrome. I'm so sick of it. This is a good football team with a quarterback that was in the Heisman mix, with an offensive line that has a couple of first-rounders on there, the left tackle and the center, and with a defense that's got like 5 stars up and down the roster, with a really tough zone scheme to decipher and a couple really good pass rushers off the edge. And God forbid Jam Miller comes back and gives them anything. He didn't do a damn thing in that game. It was all Daniel Hill in the run game. So now they get another 10 days off. Maybe Jam Miller heals up a little bit, get a little run game going against Indiana, put the pressure on Fernando Mendoza. I mean, I do not see why Indiana is more than a touchdown favorite in that game. So give me the Crimson Tide. I'll continue to roll with the Tide in the Rose Bowl coming up next week. We'll have more time to dissect that game, right? I'll do a film study this week on it, or maybe next week. And then on next week's show, we'll do some breakdowns for it because the games will be in the middle of the week. But I'm excited. I'm going to be betting Bama in that game, no doubt. Oregon belt to ass over JMU. I know JMU had a backdoor cover. I don't care. Oregon, they're only going to use that as motivation. That game was over from the start. Oregon scored touchdowns on their first 5 drives of the game. I'll get to the Dukes and the Green Wave coming up a little later in the show, but it is obvious that these teams are on different levels when they get to the playoff. Speaking of Tulane, Ole Miss, the biggest blowout of the week. 31-point winner over Tulane. Game barely stayed under. I had a horrible weekend gambling on the college football playoff. I had JMU in the first half. They lose the first half, cover the game. I had Ole Miss team total over 17.5 in the first half. They score 14 points on their first 2 drives, bing, bang, boom. Then they get a field goal. I think it was early second quarter. And then on the final drive of the half, all I need is a field goal or a touchdown in order to hit my bet. And they're first and goal inside the 5. And Austin Simmons, who came in for the injured Trinidad Chambliss, fumbles, and I don't get any points. And then, of course, what does Ole Miss do in the second half? They blow the doors off. They cover the spread. And my over, 57.5, loses by the 1 score that I needed at the end of the first half. So a comedy of errors from your boy betting this, but it was the right read because I knew Ole Miss would get off to a hot start. They were up 14-0 after the first quarter. They covered the first half spread. I thought Ole Miss was going to be very up for this game. I thought the Lane Kiffin factor was a complete non-factor. And if anything, they were going to be more motivated, more excited, more chomping at the bit to get out there and kick the crap out of a team that, frankly, had no business even being in the playoffs. So I don't think Ole Miss can take it a step further. Lacey got banged up, their star tailback, and Chambliss, we'll see what his injury status is. They both came back. Actually, no, Chambliss came back in the second half. Lacey did not. No, excuse me. They both did come back. But Lacey was in and out for, like, the whole game. Like, he would come in for a couple runs, and then he'd go out, and he would be, like, hurting on his shoulder, and then he'd come back in. So my point being, both of those guys took knocks. And likely they'll be less than 100%, and you want to be 100% when you play Georgia. So I don't see Ole Miss beating Georgia. I don't see the revenge game, right? Ole Miss lost to Georgia earlier this year. They had a big lead in the fourth quarter, and they couldn't hold on. I don't see Ole Miss avenging that loss. I think this is a good matchup for Georgia. I think they'll be able to make some adjustments on that offense, and they won't be down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And I think Georgia will handle the Rebels in that next game. The ugliest but maybe most exciting CFP game of the weekend was Miami at Texas A&M. Miami goes into College Station and wins as a 3-point underdog. The game was brutally close. No score in the first half. Miami kicked a field goal in the third quarter, and then it was tied 3-3 late. Both teams had a chance to take the lead. It was Miami that made the plays down the stretch. Mark Fletcher was a dude. Another tough loss for me gambling-wise, where my handicap on the game was Miami's offensive line, right? We bet Miami, but I also bet the Pringle rushing prop over, the other running back for Miami. And my handicap was I think Miami's offensive line is going to be really dominant in this game. Pringle's been the hotter of the 2 backs lately, so I'll go with him. He barely played. It was all Mark Fletcher. The handicap was right. Like, they ran it all over Texas A&M. I just picked the wrong running back. So, again, that's one of those scenarios where process over results. Like, the result didn't work out my way, but the process was correct. The process was we're handicapping the trenches. Miami has an edge. They're going to run it well. They're going to win the game. This guy's going to go over his prop. We lost the prop, but the process was right. And I think that's one of those scenarios where you just have to be confident that your process was right, even though the results were bad. And it was an awful gambling weekend for me. CFP, NFL was up and down. You just gotta trust the process, that you're going about your business the right way. You're watching the film, you're doing the research, you're doing the work, you get to the end result, and if the result doesn't bounce your way, don't rip up and ruin the process just because it didn't bounce your way. And I think that's an important lesson to learn, not only for me, but for anyone else listening who has bad luck. Because let's be honest, if you gamble every day, you gamble as much as we do, you're going to have bad beats. And it's how those bad beats impact your psyche and your process that define you as a gambler. Do you get completely thrown off your game? You're on tilt. It impacts your next bet. That's what you don't want to do. So Miami moves on to play Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. That'll be the New Year's Eve game. Line open 9.5. We're kind of sitting in that range now. I kind of lean Ohio State. I don't have a strong vibe there. I mean, listen, Miami's offensive line and defensive line is really good. But I don't know if I fully trust Carson Beck. And I think that Ohio State defense, right, coming off the loss in the Big Ten championship game, it kind of reminds me of last year where that loss, right, it was a week earlier. It was to Michigan, but it gave them some time to think. And I think that loss to Indiana is going to end up being a blessing in disguise. I think Ohio State's going to handle Miami. Do they cover? Probably. But I think they're going to handle Miami in that game. So the quarterfinals are set. Again, I think Ohio State will take care of business against Miami. Oregon and Texas Tech, that's going to be a fun game, man. I'll be honest, I like Texas Tech's defense a lot. The problem is I don't trust Baron Morton. And I think Oregon's got the edge at quarterback. I think Oregon might have the edge in the coaching box with Dan Lanning. And I think Oregon's weapons are getting healthy. That's going to be a really fun game. How Texas Tech gets pressure on Dante Moore is going to be fascinating because Dante Moore really struggled in the game against Indiana, and that was the one game that he really got heated up this year. He got heated up a little bit in the Iowa game too. And again, Texas Tech, they've got the nastiest defense in college football. I think I lean Texas Tech there. I really do. I think I lean Texas Tech. I think they win the game. I think the defense runs the day. Now, I don't think they're going to win the national championship because of Morton, but I think their defense is good enough to win them a game in the playoff. Alabama, I already told you I like them as a dog. I think they win outright. I know. I'm crazy. I'm gonna die on this Bama hill. And an Ole Miss in Georgia, I think will be a relatively one-sided game. I think Ole Miss has got some spunk, but I just think Georgia's the team. I think Georgia's my team to beat in the college football playoff, guys. Based off of the way the bracket's shaken out, I think it's Georgia, and I think it's Texas Tech. I would love to see Georgia and Texas Tech play in the national championship game. I did some exactas. I had some free bets on BetMGM. I did some exactas. Georgia over Texas Tech. I think I got 22-1. Georgia-Bama would be fun, too. That'd be a fun rematch, right? We've already seen it twice this year. Bama won the first game. Georgia won the second. Perfect best 2 out of 3. The SEC haters would be in shambles. We'd love to see their meltdowns on social media. But Ole Miss and Georgia might be a really fun national championship if we get there. I think there's a couple of other fun matchups. I think Ohio State against Indiana will be a fun rematch too. But I don't see that happening. Ohio State, Texas Tech will be fun. The total in that game might be like 30 with those two defenses. But we'll see. It should be a really fun playoff round. We'll have plenty of time, right? First game's not till New Year's Eve. We'll have plenty of time to dissect these games over the next week. I'll have some film studies dropping on the YouTube channel, and then I'll do another episode on the podcast next week. And then next Sunday night, I'll give you my official picks for the college football playoff as the market settles and as we get the games much closer to kick. We do have a game pretty close to kick on Monday. It's the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, or as some of my friends are calling it, the Freeze Your Ass Off Bowl. It is Utah State against Washington State. Not a very sexy matchup. The game's basically a pick'em. I think Utah State's got the better offense. I think Washington State's got the better defense. I think Bryson Barnes is the guy to watch for Utah State. He is a graduate senior. The quarterback for the Aggies is one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. I think the way I would play it, I think Utah State wins the game. I think Bryson Barnes goes over all of his props, right? Passing, rushing touchdowns. And I think the Washington State quarterback, his name is eluding me. Hold on, I was looking him up earlier. Where is his name? Oh, goodness gracious. He has some really long, weird name. And I was looking at his passing yards under. Zevi Eckhouse, the Washington State quarterback. I would go under his passing yards prop. I haven't bet any of this yet. There are no props available for this game yet. I'm recording this on a Sunday night. Usually they don't drop the props until the day of for obvious reasons because they just don't even know who's playing half the time. So there's no props to bet right now for me. You can bet Utah State. I'm actually seeing a plus 1.5 out there. I would take plus 1.5. It's over at FanDuel. Utah State plus 1.5. My best bet for the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, or as my friends are calling it, the Freeze Your Ass Off Bowl in Boise, Idaho. Bring your spuds for that one. Utah State plus 1.5. Best bet for the Potato Bowl on Monday. All right, let's go to Rise and Wine. I already hinted at this during the recap of the college football playoff, but I'm going to say it again because I like pissing people off, and I know this take pisses off a lot of people. But after watching the group of five embarrass themselves again in the college football playoff for another year, I think it's time that we end this silly experiment. The inclusivity of these teams, I don't want to say it's ruining the sport. There's plenty of other things that are much more detrimental to the sport, like head coaches having affairs with students and faculty and staff. And we saw another college football head coach at Ohio. I think his name's Brian Smith. No relation, by the way. Let me confirm that name. I don't want to get anything wrong. Yeah, Brian Smith. He was fired last week for having a relationship with a student, which is obviously not allowed. The worst part about that situation is when it was reported to the media, from the media, they said that he was fired because he had alcohol in his office and he shared alcohol with the staff after games, which is I knew that was bullshit because you don't get fired for that. I used to do that all the time with my bosses back when I worked in college sports. In fact, in minor league baseball, we used to drink in the stadium after the games. Game would end, we'd pull the tarp, and then we'd have beers on the mezzanine after the games. I was 24 years old, 23 years old, right out of college. That you don't get fired for alcohol in sports, unless you're drinking on the field during the game. You don't get fired for having alcohol in your office. It's insane. We knew there was more to that story, and there was. He was having an affair with a student, and he's having issues. I don't know if it was an extramarital affair. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But my point being, those are much more detrimental issues to the fabric of college football. The issue that we are having with the college football playoff is the competitive advantage. These group of five teams have no business being in the playoff. Their rosters are not ready. They are not capable of going on the road and winning these games. And we continue to give them spots. And the entire world is up in arms about Alabama doesn't deserve to be in. You cannot look me in the eyes and tell me Alabama is not a top 12 team in the country. I can definitely look you in the eyes and say that JMU is not a top 12 team. Actually, I know exactly where their ranking is. They're 24th. That's their ranking. Why are we allowing the 24th ranked team into a 12-team field? If the field was 24 deep, then we should be allowing the 24th ranked team in. We need to eliminate the inclusivity from the playoff. It is woke. And I hate using that word because I know, again, that's a dirty word in today's society. But it is. It's the definition of DEI. Like, we are allowing these schools to gain access to places just in the name of inclusivity, just so we can say we included everyone, which is the opposite of what the spirit of sports are supposed to be, which is earn it on the field. JMU did not earn a spot in the playoff this year. Tulane did not earn a spot in the playoff this year. The level of competition they faced and how they fared when they managed up in competition was blatantly obvious. We should have took the top 12 teams. BYU and Notre Dame. Those should have been the last two teams in the field. Can you imagine if we got Ole Miss Notre Dame or Oregon Notre Dame on Saturday night? BYU Ole Miss, Oregon BYU, and maybe BYU loses by 17 in that game too, just like JMU did. But you can't tell me for a second that BYU isn't more prepared to go on the road and beat a team like Oregon or Ole Miss than JMU. They were overmatched from the start. And I think it's time we change this silly rule. Enough with the automatic bids. Give me the top 12 teams in the rankings. When we expand, give me the top 20 teams in the rankings. However big you make the field, you've got a set of college football playoff rankings. Use them. There is no need to be putting in teams 20 and 24 in a 12-team field. The math ain't mathin'. And you saw it play out on Saturday. Both teams belt to ass. I know JMU covered. They needed a fourth down play in the final minute of the fourth quarter. It was a gift from the gambling gods if you were on JMU. They had no business being in that game. Neither did Tulane. Will they change it next year? I don't know. Last year, they changed the automatic seeding for these qualifiers, so we don't have absurd situations like Arizona State and Boise State getting buys. At least they got rid of that. Now the next step is get rid of the automatic bids. Give me the top 12 teams in the field. All right, let's close the show with an actionable element for Morning Glory. We're going to go to Monday Night Football, and we're going to give you Phillip Rivers under 27.5 yards for his longest pass. I love this bet. He was, I believe, 0 on all passes 10 or more air yards downfield in his debut against Seattle. I don't see that changing in this game. When I watched Rivers in that game against the Seahawks, it was quick stuff, screens, draws, in breaking routes. He was not hanging in the pocket, trying to hit dudes down the field. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against the Niners, who are going to play a ton of zone, drop back, blitz Phillip, make him get the ball out quick. So, and he might not even make it through the whole game. You never know. I'll go under 27.5 yards for Phillip Rivers' longest pass on Monday Night Football. Hopefully we can, I think we hit last week. I forget what our bet was in last week's game, but I do think we hit. Actually, hold on, let me check. That's a good question before I wrap up the show to see if I'm actually on a winning streak or not. Let's see. Last week, yeah, we gave you the Tua under last week. Tua under passing attempts. So we hit that one. And then 2 weeks ago, Jalen Hurts over 7.5 rushing attempts did not hit. So we are on a 1-bet winning streak for Morning Glory. We hit the Tua under passing attempts last week. This week, Phillip Rivers under 27.5 yards for his longest pass. That will wrap up the show. Just a reminder, if you learned anything today, if you laughed, if you cried, if you felt anything for me as a host, if you loved the show, if you hated the show, I don't care. Feel anything. Click the buttons. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the newsletter. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on X. Interact with the show. I will respond to you, especially if you respond to a show post. I will absolutely respond. I don't always respond to the trolls who slide into my mentions because I'm just burnt out from social media. But fresh slate, fresh canvas for the morning after accounts. So if you slide in there, I promise I'll give you a response. Same thing with the YouTube channel. If you make a comment, I'll try my best to respond to you guys. But continue to support the content as we move forward through the new year. One more show left in 2025. We'll do it again next Sunday night, and we'll drop it Monday morning, and we'll get you set for the College Football Playoff, and we'll get you set for the final week of the NFL regular season. So we are at the climax of ball here in 2025. I'm your host, Jared Smith. I appreciate you tuning in this week to the morning after.